Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Herrmann's big Chicago Fire Season 13 career decision could still be undone in one tragic way. Herrmann's choice to get demoted in Chicago Fire instead of becoming chief doesn't have to be permanent, but promoting him in the future wouldn't necessarily be the triumph it seems. In fact, there's a strong likelihood that reversing his decision at this point would lead to tragic and potentially irreversible consequences for another vital member of the Chicago Fire cast. The biggest shock of the Chicago Fire Season 13 finale wasn't just that Herrmann chose not to take the captain's exam, but that he accepted a demotion so his buddy Mauch could become 51's new engine lieutenant. Looking at his history, there's one way Herrmann could change his mind in Chicago Fire Season 14. Unfortunately, it comes at a cost. When the 51 first arrives on the scene at the start of the 2025-1 Chicago crossover, his role is to shadow and assist Chief Pascal in overseeing the rescue and cleanup operation from a makeshift HQ at the site of the explosion. However, Christopher Herrmann's soon established as the type not to stay comfortable in that role for long. As the crisis intensifies and the lives of the 51 and numerous civilians are put at risk, Herrmann leaves Pascal to assist Severide in finding the source of the explosion. Herrmann's declaration that he needs to be in the trenches is the sole utterance of the crossover's title, so it can be assumed this is intended as a big moment. Apart from a few interactions regarding Trudy's near-fatal shooting and general updates on the CPD's investigation, Herrmann's interactions in the crossover are generally limited to those with the Chicago Fire crew. Between that and his choice to rush into action rather than remain in a safe location with Pascal, Herrmann's identity as a firefighter above all else is demonstrably clear. This means that Herrmann doesn't get to participate in the 2025-1 Chicago crossover's best character pairings, but it does make it less surprising that he later passes on becoming chief. What's arguably more notable, however, is his reasoning. Herrmann tells Pascal they don't need two people supervising when the battalion chief is already present, making his own oversight redundant. In other words, when there's somebody else willing to supervise, Herrmann's more at home focusing directly on what needs to be done. The finale justifies his demotion because Christopher Herrmann isn't a man who feels comfortable doing his job from behind a desk, but his exchange with Pascal does suggest a specific circumstance in which he might consider becoming chief. Since it's already been established that Herrmann has no interest in leadership while Pascal's still manning the helm, the only reason he would change his mind about becoming chief is if Pascal were no longer occupying the position. He says himself throughout the season that he has reservations about even applying to potentially overtake Pascal's job, even with Bowden's blessing. In fact, this was a concern in the writers' room throughout much of the season as well. As Chicago Fire showrunner Andrew Newman told Screen Rant prior to the season finale, it's almost impossible to promote Herrmann to battalion chief without cutting Pascal from the show. Detailing the considerations that had to be taken into account for Herrmann's storyline, Newman explained. Herrmann accepting a demotion was a way to resolve these issues to the benefit of each character involved. Mauch gets his promotion while Pascal keeps his current role and Herrmann focuses on the part of the job he cares about most, even if it means not advancing in his career. It's hard to imagine his promotion working out as well. If Pascal were going to leave of his own volition, it would have made the most sense for him to retire after Monica died. But Pascal staying at the 51 after his wife's death suggests it would take an even bigger tragedy for him to leave. Herrmann filling Pascal's shoes may even require Pascal to be killed off or fired. It's already confirmed that Herrmann's demotion will stick in Chicago Fire Season 14, so it can be reasonably assumed he won't be changing his mind in the near future. However, this also means that there's little chance of Pascal deciding to leave at the beginning of the season, when Monica's death is still fresh enough to potentially inspire his retirement. After keeping his position through his wife's death and his presumably stressful period as a murder suspect, it would feel tonally off for Pascal to suddenly now retire peacefully with no provocation. That doesn't mean he can't still eventually retire of his own accord, but it makes the most sense at this point to give Monica's storyline some distance. Has been the heart and soul of Firehouse 51 for years, a man who wears his emotions on his sleeve, carries the weight of the Firehouse's history like a badge of honor, and still somehow finds time to pour beers at Molly's. His recent big career decision, stepping further into leadership and considering a permanent move toward a desk job in the firehouse, felt like the natural evolution of a man who has been running into burning buildings for decades. But Chicago Fire rarely lets its characters sail into the sunset without one last trial, and for Herrmann, there's a haunting possibility that his choice could be undone in the most tragic way imaginable. Herrmann's decision was born out of love. After years of dangerous calls, close calls, and losing too many brothers and sisters in the line of duty, he's begun to see the writing on the wall. He's not the 20-something firefighter he once was, charging fearlessly into danger without a second thought. The job has taken a toll, physically, mentally, and emotionally. The opportunity to transition into a leadership role, one that keeps him in the firehouse but out of the most dangerous situations, seemed like a gift from the universe. He could still shape the next generation of firefighters, still be there for his crew, but finally give his wife Cindy and their kids the peace of mind they've long deserved. And yet, the very thing Herrmann is running from, tragedy, might be what pulls him back in. Chicago Fire has never shied away from emotional gut punches, and the writers have a knack for putting Herrmann in situations that test his loyalty, courage, and heart. The tragic scenario that could undo everything. A devastating call that threatens one of his own, forcing Herrmann to make a split-second choice: stay behind the desk, or put his life on the line one more time. Imagine this: Firehouse 51 is called to a massive warehouse fire on the south side. It's the kind of call that has "all hands on deck" written all over it. Herrmann, now technically in more of a supervisory role, is supposed to remain outside coordinating operations. But then the call comes over the radio. One of his guys is trapped inside. Maybe it's Ritter, the young firefighter Herrmann has mentored since day one, who looks up to Herrmann like a second father. Maybe it's Cruz, his closest friend at the firehouse, who's pinned under debris and running out of air. In that moment, all the logic, all the hard-earned wisdom that pushed Herrmann toward this safer role, goes out the window. Herrmann is not just a firehouse lieutenant, he is a firefighter to his core, a man who has always believed that no one gets left behind. He would tear off his helmet if it meant saving a brother. The desk job would mean nothing if he had to live with the guilt of knowing he stood by while someone he loved perished. So he charges in. The fire is worse than expected. Floors collapsing, smoke so thick you can't see a foot in front of you, heat so intense it feels like your gear is melting. Herrmann finds the trapped firefighter, manages to free them, but not without serious consequences. Maybe Herrmann collapses from smoke inhalation just as the rest of the crew gets there. Maybe a beam falls and he takes the hit, leaving him with injuries that are life-threatening or, at best, career-ending. This would be the cruel irony: Herrmann's decision to transition to a safer position undone in one single heroic act. His body might not recover enough to allow him to even sit behind a desk at 51. The job he thought would let him retire with dignity could slip through his fingers because of the very thing that has defined his career: his unwillingness to stand still when someone needs saving.